and welcome to Daily Debrief from People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya and today we are going to talk about the peace talks in Ukraine in the context of the VUCA graves, the coalition government in Israel losing its majority in parliament and widespread protests in Peru over rising prices. We go to Ukraine first, where the conflict is in its 7th week. Dozens of bodies have been discovered in Bucha. Russia has been blamed by the West for the killings. However, Russia has consistently denied the allegation. It has claimed that Western countries and the media are ignoring any evidence that contradicts the genocide narrative. It has also said that peace talks were at a crucial juncture when the bodies came to light. Abdul from People's Dispatch is here with more. Abdul, why does Russia call it a false provocation? And also, can you help us understand the Western response to Russia, China and other countries demanding a probe at the UNSC?
If you see the sequence of events, many experts who follow the reason have pointed it out that the allegation that these killings were committed by Russians does not stand true. For following reasons. They say that Russians vacated the city, Bucha, on 29th and 30th night, and the Ukrainian forces took over the city next day. So why did they wait for 3 days to announce that they have discovered a large number of bodies lying on the roads and around the city streets? So the gap between the taking over the city and the time of revolution of it basically creates suspicion that this is a kind of a false, staged kind of basically attempt to derail the negotiations. If you see what happens following the revolution of the thing, the Russian allegation is that if you see Western media, Western countries have taken stand that this is a Russian doing, despite the fact that Russia has refuted it, and Russia and other countries, those who have kind of taken anti-war position in United Nations Security Council and other platforms, they have demanded that there should be a fair and independent investigation before we come to the conclusion that who has committed it. So, despite going through that process, the haste with which the Western media has blamed it on Russia without any proof, without their governments not confirming what is who is behind all this, basically creates the suspicion that this is a plot, this is a kind of a staged event to prolong the war. Because before the war, before this revolution, Russians had claimed that Ukrainians were ready to kind of give concessions on major issues.
Yes, yes, Abdul, I wanted to ask you, what would an agreement really look like right now? Do these allegations and counterclaims mean anything to the peace talks?
If you go by the statements made by Zelensky yesterday, it seems that the talk will continue, despite certain advantages taken from this Bucha incident. Zelensky was very positive about the need of talks, because he said that there is no other alternative. The other alternative is to lose territory to Russians and no end of conflict. So if you want the end of the conflict, there is no other way but to negotiate. Now, how that negotiation will turn up, it is too early to say, but given the larger picture which emerges from the Russian media and from the local Ukrainian media, we see that the talks in Istanbul and the other talks which were going on online, by and large there is an agreement on certain points, the points which are very crucial for the entire event. The one major point on which Ukrainians have agreed by and large is that they are ready to proclaim neutrality, which is one of the central demands put forward by Russia. They have also agreed, as per the Russian claims, to not allow any kind of military exercise in the region without the permission of the people who are participating in the talks. They have also agreed, as far as Russians are concerned, the Russians have also agreed that they have no problem with Ukrainian joining the European Union, which is an important thing. So these are the points on which there is, by and large, an agreement, you can say. the major point on which there is a disagreement, which continues, is the question of Donbass. What will happen to Luhansk and Donetsk republics, and on the question of Crimea by and large. So until these issues are resolved, I think the talks will continue.
All right, Abdul, thanks very much for that, and we'll be back with you in just another minute. We move to Israel now. By sending her resignation to Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Yamina's Idit Salman, the chief whip of the coalition in power, has brought the government in the country to below the majority mark. Salman has said that it is time for Israel to have a Jewish and Zionist government. We'll return to Abdul, who has been following this development. Abdul, does this mean fresh elections in Israel?
Not right now. Given the arithmetic in the Israeli parliament, if you see, there is 120. There are 120 seats in the parliament, and out of these, both opposition and the ruling coalition are tied at 60 each. So until there is a reduction in numbers of the ruling coalition, there is no immediate danger. And there is another point which is very important to note, that the opposition is in no condition to form a new government at this moment, because the 5 seats which are held by the Arab Joint List, they are not going to support an alternative coalition which is led by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay.
So given that arithmetic, it looks like that this particular event will not lead to fresh elections. One more point which is very important is the parliament right now is not in session. It will resume its sitting in May. Before that, there is enough time for the Yamina-led coalition to kind of find some ways to regain some majority. So just to kind of reiterate my point, one major point which should be taken into the consideration when we are talking about the Israeli government formation and so on and so forth. The elections are, there are already 4 elections in last 3 years, and it is very difficult for all the political parties to go into another election at this moment. So they will try to basically prolong it for next, say, 6 months or so before the fresh elections are called.
Yeah. Okay. So, Abdul, I'm also very intrigued. It's very intriguing the kind of words that she has chosen to use, a Jewish and Zionist government in Israel, and also saying that, what would these kind of government mean for the Palestinian people there? What does she really mean by using these terms?
The use of the words Zionist and not right-wing enough is basically a sign of the hegemony of right-wing in Israeli politics. You cannot be but right-wing if you want to survive in Israeli politics today. If you see the Labour Party, if you see what we considered the radical left like Meretz, all these parties have taken various right-wing positions. They have been forced to come into coalition with the right-wing parties to form a government to oust another right-wing leader, Benjamin Netanyahu. So the alternative for people is very limited. All of them are right-wing. The problem, what she is hinting at, the government which is led by Naftali Bennett is, though a right-wing government, also has in its coalition what they call a centrist party called Yeretit, or they have, as we said, left-wing groups, so-called left-wing groups. Then there is one Arab party, Islamist Arab party, RAM, which is also part of the coalition. So the right wing in Israel sees Naftali Bennett's position as a compromising position because of the presence of centrist and the Arab parties in the coalition. And therefore, they want a government which is not intervened by, not controlled by, as they argue, by these groups. What will it mean to Palestinians? This government is, Naftali Bennett government, despite the fact that there is Arab presence and there is a left presence and centrist, is as right-wing as it can be. It has been, in fact, more oppressive than the every previous regime before it against Palestinians. They have increased the mass arrest. They have increased the operation of Palestinians in the occupied territories. They have led various kinds of diplomatic measures internationally to isolate Palestinians. So if it comes to the policies against Palestinians, by the way, Naftali Bennett comes from the party which basically is one of those parties which clearly say that there is no two-state solution. So I think withdrawal of this support and this government becoming a minority will lead to further oppression of Palestinians, because if you want to become popular in Israel, you will have to prove that you are as right-wing as it can be. And therefore, Naftali Bennett will be in a more, you can say, pressing situation. And you can say there is an incentive also. If there is an election, then he is not bound by the coalition arithmetic. So he is not the pressures from Ram and centrist and leftist groups will not be working. So it means further oppression, further problems for the Palestinian people, both in occupied territories and in Israel as well.
All right, Abdul, thank you very much for the update, and I'm sure we'll be following the story more. Thanks. Inflation recently topped a 26-year high in Peru, and people are out on the streets. There are widespread protests against Pedro Castillo's government. Zoe Alexandra of People's Dispatch spoke with us earlier.
Thanks so much for having me. Yes, well, today I'm here to talk about the continuing political crisis in Peru faced by the government of Pedro Castillo. We've been talking a lot on this show about the political pressure faced by his government from right-wing forces. He has been forced to reconstitute his cabinet 4 times. Several members of his political party, the Free Peru Party, have faced intense campaigns in the media and by the judiciary, attempting to slander them, accusing them of corruption and other charges. Pedro Castillo himself has faced 2 impeachment motions. And currently, he's dealing with a quite complicated situation, which is that truck drivers have launched a strike. It has been going on for over a week now. They're protesting, and they have legitimate demands, which is that they're responding to the increase in fuel prices, which is being felt globally, which is also being felt in Peru. They're taking the streets in several cities across the country, staging road blockades, and blocking major transit routes. And Pedro Castillo, this comes at a very challenging moment for his government. Only a week after he faced the 2nd impeachment motion, where there's a lot of political instability, and many left analysts have pointed out to the class character of these protests, of those who are participating in these trucker strikes, that many are coming from rich and affluent neighborhoods. There's a lot of nationalist sentiment, many activists who have been against Pedro Castillo from the beginning. So in the protests, you're seeing a lot of signs that say out communists, out Pedro Castillo. So these protests, these truckers' protests, which were motivated by legitimate economic demands, have been wielded in some sense by the right wing to raise political demands, calling for him to be ousted, supporting this right-wing campaign against him, against his party. And this has been a very challenging moment for Pedro Castillo. In response, there has been a lot of police repression on these protests. 6 people have been killed in the last week. Pedro Castillo attempted to impose a state of a curfew, but hours after he signed the decree, he suspended it. It is clear that there's a lot of internal tension right now. Pedro Castillo does not have a clear way out of this crisis. The right wing is capitalizing on the discontent of the people, which, of course, as we know, the fuel prices are not really dictated by Pedro Castillo's government. This is part of a larger global price increase, global inflation that's being sparked by the war in Ukraine. And so it is definitely a challenging moment for Peru. The new Peru party, Veronica Mendoza, she has come out strongly against the government and criticized its response to these protests. It is a moment of great tension, even among the left, the right. So we will continue to follow these protests, continue to follow what's happening in Peru. One thing is for sure, that the political instability and all of this chaos is not good for the people. The people want to live, the people want to have a functioning democracy, and it's clear that the Peruvian right wing has not for one moment allowed this government to really attempt to even impose the policies, to really work with the Congress to fight for a better Peru. And it is unfortunate that these attacks keep happening, and that we are not sure how these protests are going to end.
And that is all we have today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Do come back to us tomorrow. Please visit www.peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.